Talo be jampel kam ka chike.
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
The story of Apocalypto 2, in this imagined keynote presentation, begins with the deep breath of a world standing on the edge of irreversible change. It is the continuation of a journey that first captured the raw heartbeat of the jungle, the desperation of survival, and the unstoppable force of a collapsing civilization. The sequel carries that same pulse forward, but now it enters an era where the collapse of one world gives birth to the rise of another, violent, foreign, and transformative. The vision behind this conceptual sequel is not simply to revisit the struggles of Jaguar Paw, it is to explore the emotional, spiritual, and cultural earthquakes that come when two entirely different worlds collide. The first film ended with the arrival of strange, unknown figures on distant shores. This second chapter begins by exploring the consequences of that arrival, not as spectacle, but as a human story woven from fear, hope, resistance, and the primal instinct to protect one's blood. The keynote opens by acknowledging that this is not a tale of empires in grand halls or kings negotiating treaties behind carved stone walls. Instead, it centers entirely on the people forced to stand at the crossroads of an unprecedented threat: families, hunters, children, healers, and warriors who have no concept of the storm coming toward them. The creative approach of this imagined project emphasizes immersion. It demands that the audience feel the humidity of the forest, the distant thunder of unfamiliar weapons, the ache of loss as disease sweeps silently through the land, and the tremor of courage that ignites within those who refuse to be erased from history. The story begins several years after Jaguar Paw's escape from the ceremonial city and his defiant return to his family. His tribe, once fragmented by fear and exploitation, has pieced itself back together like a woven reed basket, stronger in some places, fragile in others, but held by a shared resolve. Jaguar Paw is no longer merely a survivor, he is a symbol of resilience for his village. He carries the weight of expectation but also the tenderness of a father who has seen how easily everything can be taken. His children know of the horrors he endured only through whispers and lessons embedded in stories told around the fire. His wife Seven, steadfast and perceptive, has become an anchor of wisdom in the community. The village thrives, but their peace is layered with the memories of the lives they lost. Even before the arrival of the outsiders, the jungle itself seems restless. Birds migrate strangely, travelers from distant villages speak of stars that look different in the night sky. The elders interpret these changes as omens, though no one can agree on whether they foretell a blessing or a curse. When the first rumors of foreign men appear, they sound too fantastical to believe. People describe skin as pale as moonlight, metal that catches the sun with blinding brilliance, and beasts larger than any jaguar, yet submissive enough to be ridden. These stories spread like mist among the tribes, growing with each retelling. Some dismiss them as delusions, others fear that spirits from the underworld have come to punish humanity. Jaguar Paw, hardened by the traumas of his past, resists believing in myths unless he has seen them himself. But the ground beneath him begins to shift when a neighboring tribe seeks refuge in his village. Their bodies tremble with fever, their skin marked by spots neither the healers nor the shamans recognize. They speak of entire clans wiped out by invisible breath, an illness that spreads faster than arrows and kills without warning. Jaguar Paw's village fears this sickness more deeply than any enemy wielding weapons. As the sickness begins to take root among scattered villages, the true invasion begins. Foreign soldiers, led by a charismatic yet ruthless captain, move inland. Their arrogance is matched only by their desperation. They are explorers who have traveled far, endured hunger and storms, and now seek dominion in unfamiliar land. They believe they are destined to claim it. Their weapons overwhelm, their horses terrify, and their languages confuse the native ear. The arrival of these soldiers does not come with declarations of war. Instead, it comes through the simple act of claiming authority. They demand supplies, manpower, and obedience in the name of a distant king. When persuasion fails, violence follows. Jaguar Paw, torn between the safety of his family and his responsibility to protect his people, ventures to observe this new threat firsthand. What he finds shakes him more deeply than any sacred ritual or execution he witnessed in the first film. He sees broken bodies, burned homes, and people bound by iron. The foreign soldiers move with a structure and confidence unknown in his world. They carry weapons that pierce through wood and bone with terrifying force. They bring priests who speak of one God and condemn the old ways as savage. They bring diseases that cut down even the strongest of warriors. They bring interpreters, natives from distant regions who have already been subdued and converted, who now assist the strangers in conquering others. But they also bring divisions. Some indigenous leaders, eager for power or protection, ally themselves with the newcomers, believing them to be divine or unstoppable. This fractures the landscape into factions, those who resist, those who submit, and those who simply try to survive. The keynote describes how Jaguar Paw becomes the voice of resistance not out of ambition but out of necessity. His earlier experiences with exploitation taught him the price of submission. He understands that once a people lose their freedom, they lose their identity, their rituals, and eventually even their memory of who they once were. As tension builds, the jungle becomes a battleground defined by stealth rather than sheer force. Jaguar Paw and his allies use the dense environment to their advantage, striking from the shadows, disappearing into the foliage, and employing guerrilla tactics the foreigners cannot anticipate. The soldiers, however, respond with escalating brutality, burning villages and capturing civilians to force compliance. The keynote elaborates extensively on the emotional toll of these encounters. Jaguar Paw struggles with the growing fear in his children's eyes, with the silent worry in Seven's heart, and with the guilt of leading warriors who may never return to their families. He does not want to become a leader, but circumstances push him into the role. A critical moment arrives when the foreigners capture his son during an ambush. This becomes the turning point of the narrative. The loss pierces Jaguar Paw deeper than any blade. His son, kidnapped and bound to be transported to a coastal camp, becomes the beating heart of Jaguar Paw's mission. The keynote explores his psychological unraveling and rebuilding, rage wrestling with logic, despair battling hope. Every decision becomes sharper, every step heavier. As Jaguar Paw gathers a small group of allies to infiltrate the enemy's stronghold, the jungle itself becomes both an enemy and an ally. Storms break open the sky, rivers flood, and paths vanish, forcing the characters to confront nature along with their human adversaries. The sickness spreading from village to village becomes an invisible antagonist, stealing time from those planning resistance. The foreigners, too, suffer from it, though their arrogance blinds them to its seriousness. The coastal camp is depicted as a world in transition, a chaotic assembly of wooden structures, burning torches, caged captives, soldiers drunk on temporary dominance, and horses stamping the muddy earth. The keynote highlights the contrast between native silence and foreign noise. Jaguar Paw infiltrates the camp under cover of darkness, moving like a shadow, relying on instinct sharpened by survival. He witnesses unspeakable cruelty but also glimpses of doubt among the foreigners, moments that remind the audience that even conquerors are not monolithic. The sequence of rescuing his son unfolds with a mixture of tension, heartbreak, and explosive action. Jaguar Paw must fight a captain who embodies the philosophy of domination. Their confrontation becomes symbolic, a clash of two worlds, one rooted in spiritual connection to land, the other driven by conquest and greed. Jaguar Paw's victory does not come from superior strength but from his bond with the jungle and his refusal to surrender. But victory is not without consequence. As he and his son escape, they witness the arrival of an entire fleet of ships beyond the horizon. The implication is shattering, what they fought was only the beginning. More soldiers, more weapons, more disease, all of it approaches with the inevitability of a rising tide. Jaguar Paw returns to his people not with false promises but with truth. The world has changed, the threat has multiplied, and survival will require unity unlike anything they have known. The keynote concludes on a note of defiant resilience. Jaguar Paw, standing with his family and his tribe, declares that the future will not be shaped by fear alone. Even as the storm approaches, the spirit of the people remains unbroken. Their connection to the land, the forest, the animals, and each other becomes their greatest weapon. The film's conceptual vision invites the audience to witness not a defeat but a transformation, a story about survival against forces too vast to comprehend yet confronted with courage. The forest that surrounds Jaguar Paw's village is not merely a backdrop but a living, breathing entity that shapes every decision, every movement, and every emotion of the characters. Its canopy filters sunlight in fragmented patterns, and its dense undergrowth conceals predators, allies, and dangers alike. Every leaf that trembles in the wind, every distant call of a bird, becomes a signal, a warning, or an omen. Jaguar Paw has learned to read these signs, to sense when the air carries fear or when the earth itself trembles with the weight of unseen forces. The keynote emphasizes that in this story, the environment is a silent character, one that challenges both the indigenous people and the intruders. The foreigners, for all their strength, armor, and metal, are at a disadvantage here, alien to the rhythm of life that pulses through the forest. The jungle favors those who understand it, who respect it, who move with it rather than against it. As the narrative unfolds, the keynote delves deeply into the internal transformations of Jaguar Paw himself. Once a young hunter who fled death and the cruelty of the city, he now carries the complex burdens of fatherhood, leadership, and survival in a changing world. His character arc is defined not only by physical action but by psychological evolution. He must reconcile his instinct for immediate survival with the long-term needs of his tribe. He must teach his children courage without exposing them to unnecessary danger. He must find hope in a world increasingly dominated by fear, violence, and disease. His relationship with Seven is explored with nuance, highlighting the emotional labor she carries, the quiet power she wields in guiding the community, and the unspoken tensions that arise when survival forces impossible choices. Their bond becomes a central emotional anchor, a reminder that love, care, and family are motivations as powerful as revenge or heroism. The keynote also expands on the supporting characters, giving them depth and purpose beyond their roles as allies or victims. The healer Ixchel embodies the tension between tradition and adaptation. She uses knowledge passed down from ancestors to combat sickness, but she is forced to innovate when the diseases brought by foreigners resist all conventional methods. Her presence illustrates the theme that cultural wisdom is not static, it must evolve to survive. Eagle of the East, a young but formidable warrior from a neighboring tribe, represents the theme of unity. Initially skeptical of Jaguar Paw's leadership, he learns that survival depends on collaboration rather than competition. Their dynamic explores leadership, loyalty, and the complexities of forging alliances in a fragmented world. Even minor characters are given narrative weight, villagers who risk everything to hide supplies, scouts who return with intelligence despite mortal danger, and children whose observations reveal the contrast between innocence and brutality. The keynote narrative delves into the psychological and strategic aspects of the conflict with the foreigners. Unlike traditional war films that rely solely on large-scale battles, the imagined sequel emphasizes stealth, cunning, and resourcefulness. Jaguar Paw and his allies use the topography to their advantage, setting traps, creating false trails, and exploiting weaknesses in the invaders' organization. They learn to move like shadows, strike quickly, and vanish before retaliation. This approach highlights intelligence and ingenuity as forms of resistance, challenging the assumption that physical power alone dictates survival. The foreigners, overconfident in their technological advantage, underestimate the natives' deep understanding of the land. The keynote underscores the tension between brute force and intimate knowledge, showing that victory is rarely guaranteed, even for those with superior weapons. Disease continues to be an omnipresent threat. The keynote expands on its impact, describing how sickness reshapes the social and emotional landscape of the story. Entire families are lost overnight, villages are abandoned, and the fear of contagion forces hard choices. This invisible antagonist tests every character, emphasizing vulnerability and human fragility in a world of overwhelming forces. Jaguar Paw's decisions become moral crucibles: whom to save first, how to ration medicine or food, and when to risk exposure to save another life. These dilemmas elevate the story beyond action, turning it into a meditation on survival, morality, and the weight of leadership in times of crisis. The coastal camp, the epicenter of the foreign presence, is depicted with sensory richness. The keynote describes the clash of smells, sounds, and visual chaos, burning timber, the clang of metal, the cries of the captured, and the ceaseless motion of ships and soldiers. Jaguar Paw infiltrates this space not as an invincible hero but as a careful, calculating predator. Each step is measured, each breath controlled, each observation vital. The keynote emphasizes suspense and tension, drawing the audience into the stakes of the mission. The confrontation with Captain Rodrigo Alvarez becomes the narrative apex. Alvarez is not merely a villain but a personification of an ideology, a belief in conquest, order, and the righteousness of imposing foreign rule. The clash between him and Jaguar Paw represents the collision of civilizations, one rooted in harmony with nature, community, and spiritual continuity, the other in hierarchy, exploitation, and rigid ideology. The escape sequence is both a physical and emotional crescendo. Jaguar Paw navigates rivers swollen from rain, jungles slick with mud, and cliffs that test the limits of human endurance. His son, now rescued, becomes a symbol of hope, continuity, and the stakes of their struggle. The keynote emphasizes that this is not a sanitized action scene but one infused with emotional resonance, where every slip could mean death, and every sound could betray them to pursuers. The physical journey mirrors the psychological one, a path through fear, loss, and desperation toward renewal and resilience. As the narrative nears its conclusion, the keynote explores the theme of inevitability. The arrival of additional ships on the horizon is not treated as a cliffhanger for spectacle but as a meditation on history. It reflects the inexorable advance of change, the collision of cultures, and the endurance required to maintain identity. Jaguar Paw's speech to his people encapsulates this philosophy: survival is not about denying the storm but learning to navigate it. The forest, family, and community become the tools of resilience, symbols of continuity in a world that seeks to erase them. The keynote also integrates cultural elements with meticulous attention. Language, rituals, hunting practices, and spiritual beliefs are woven into the narrative, not as exotic decoration but as integral components of character and plot. Dialogues in the Maya language, the use of traditional instruments to signal danger, the preparation of medicinal herbs, and the observance of sacred rites reinforce authenticity. This attention to detail ensures that the story respects the culture it portrays while using it to enrich drama and emotional depth. The narrative arc concludes with a reflection on hope, courage, and adaptability. Jaguar Paw stands as a figure who embodies resilience and wisdom, whose victories are measured not only in survival but in the preservation of culture and identity. The keynote leaves the audience with a sense that history is neither fixed nor forgiving, but that human ingenuity, courage, and unity can carve out spaces for survival and dignity. In this imagined sequel, Apocalypto 2 becomes more than a story of action. It is a meditation on the human spirit facing forces beyond comprehension, on the balance between nature and civilization, and on the timeless struggle to protect what is precious in the face of overwhelming change. As Jaguar Paw and his family return to the relative safety of the forest, the keynote draws attention to the subtle but profound changes the environment has undergone. The trees, once dense and familiar, now bear scars from the encroachment of foreign activity, branches broken, undergrowth trampled, rivers polluted with ash and detritus. Even the animals behave differently, fleeing or hiding in ways that signal the creeping impact of human intrusion. The keynote emphasizes that the forest, for all its resilience, is not immune to the forces that reshape the world. It becomes a mirror of the struggle faced by Jaguar Paw's people. Survival requires adaptation, vigilance, and a deep understanding of the new dynamics imposed by an encroaching civilization. The keynote introduces new subplots that weave throughout the main narrative, enhancing the richness and complexity of the story. One such subplot follows Ixchel, the healer, as she experiments with unconventional remedies to combat the foreign diseases. Her journey is both scientific and spiritual, blending empirical observation with ritual and prayer. She studies the behaviors of plants, animals, and minerals, seeking patterns and cures that might save lives. Her trials are marked by both success and tragedy, highlighting the cost of knowledge and the emotional burden borne by those who attempt to fight forces beyond their understanding. The keynote conveys her growing reputation as a figure of wisdom and hope, someone who embodies the bridge between ancestral knowledge and innovation in the face of catastrophe. Meanwhile, Eagle of the East's story deepens, illustrating the tension between pride and necessity. Initially resistant to Jaguar Paw's leadership, he undergoes a transformation as the dangers of the foreign presence intensify. The keynote explores his internal struggle, loyalty to his tribe versus recognition that survival may demand cooperation. His character serves as a vehicle to explore broader themes of unity and intertribal relations, emphasizing that in times of crisis, old rivalries must be set aside for collective survival. The moments of camaraderie that develop between him and Jaguar Paw are underscored by mutual respect, shared loss, and strategic collaboration, reinforcing the narrative's emphasis on the necessity of solidarity. The keynote then turns to the foreign adversaries, providing a more nuanced view of Captain Rodrigo Alvarez and his officers. While they are portrayed as antagonists, the keynote adds layers that humanize them without diminishing their threat. Alvarez is driven by ambition, duty, and an ideology shaped by his upbringing and the rigid structures of his society. He believes he is bringing order to chaos and perceives himself as an agent of progress. This complexity allows the keynote to explore the moral ambiguity of conquest, raising questions about the interplay between intention, action, and consequence. The officers who serve under him are similarly complex, some motivated by loyalty, others by fear, and a few by curiosity about the land and its people. These layers prevent the narrative from reducing the conflict to simple good versus evil, instead presenting it as a collision of cultures, philosophies, and survival imperatives. As the campaign against the foreigners intensifies, the keynote expands on the strategic and tactical elements of the story. Jaguar Paw's guerrilla operations are meticulously detailed, from the construction of traps using natural materials to the manipulation of the landscape to channel enemy movements. Streams are dammed to flood encampments, vines are rigged to entangle horses, and hidden pits are camouflaged to capture unwary soldiers. Each action is interspersed with narrative reflections on the physical and emotional toll of such tactics, revealing that strategy in the jungle is as much about patience, observation, and psychological insight as it is about raw strength. The keynote emphasizes the intricate choreography required to survive in such an environment, highlighting the intelligence and adaptability of the indigenous characters. The keynote also explores the psychological impact of prolonged conflict on civilians, particularly children. Scenes depict young ones observing the forest with a mixture of curiosity and fear, learning early the skills that will be necessary for survival. They mimic hunters' movements, practice hiding, and develop acute senses for danger. The keynote treats these moments not as trivial or ancillary but as formative, illustrating the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, resilience, and cultural identity. Children's observations provide a counterpoint to the adult strategies, emphasizing the continuity of culture and the natural intuition of those growing up immersed in the forest. As the narrative reaches its midpoint, a pivotal chapter focuses on a daring infiltration of the coastal camp. Jaguar Paw, guided by intuition and the support of Eagle of the East and other trusted allies, navigates a labyrinth of patrols, cages, and burning structures. The keynote expands on each stage of this journey with immersive sensory detail, the scent of smoke and salt water, the sharp glint of weapons in torchlight, the oppressive heat of the tropical night, and the muffled cries of captives. This sequence heightens suspense while reinforcing the stakes. The mission is not only a rescue but a symbolic assertion of agency against overwhelming odds. The keynote emphasizes the psychological tension, showing how fear, adrenaline, and hope intersect to shape decision-making in extreme circumstances. In the climactic confrontation with Captain Alvarez, the keynote explores the philosophical as well as physical dimensions of conflict. Alvarez embodies the rationalized cruelty of conquest, while Jaguar Paw represents intuitive resilience and moral clarity rooted in empathy and respect for life. Their battle is as much about ideology as it is about combat. The keynote highlights the contrast between imposed hierarchy and natural order, between the efficiency of force and the wisdom of experience. Every strike, every maneuver, and every hesitation carries symbolic weight, illustrating the deeper themes of cultural collision and human endurance. Following the confrontation, the keynote elaborates on the escape and its cascading consequences. The rescued son becomes a symbol of continuity and the stakes of generational survival. The escape sequence is depicted with cinematic intensity, with jagged cliffs, rushing rivers, and dense jungle foliage providing constant obstacles. Every movement carries risk, and every decision carries moral weight, emphasizing that victory in this context is measured not only in survival but in the preservation of identity and community. The keynote describes the emotional resonance of this journey, highlighting the relief, gratitude, and exhaustion experienced by both rescuers and rescued. The keynote then shifts to the broader consequences of the incursion. The arrival of additional ships on the horizon signals that the challenges are far from over. Jaguar Paw's people must now confront the reality that survival is not a static goal but an ongoing struggle. The keynote underscores the narrative theme that resilience is cultivated over time through cooperation, vigilance, and adaptability. The villagers engage in strategic planning, resource management, and the reinforcement of social bonds, illustrating that cultural continuity requires both tactical acumen and emotional intelligence. The keynote continues by exploring the spiritual and cultural dimensions of this struggle. Rituals, ceremonies, and traditional practices are woven into the narrative as both a means of coping with trauma and a tool for reinforcing communal identity. The keynote describes the use of songs, dances, and storytelling as mechanisms for psychological resilience, teaching younger generations the values and knowledge of their ancestors. These elements are not decorative but essential, showing that cultural practices are integral to the survival of both mind and body in the face of overwhelming external threats. As the approaching foreign fleet looms on the horizon, Jaguar Paw's village faces a tense mix of fear, determination, and strategic calculation. The keynote emphasizes the communal preparations, showing not just warriors but entire families mobilizing. The forest becomes both shield and weapon, paths are concealed, traps are reinforced, and every tree, river bend, and cliff face is reimagined as part of a defensive strategy. Women and elders contribute in ways as critical as the hunters and warriors. They gather medicinal plants, prepare food for those who may be away for days, and maintain the morale of the children, teaching songs and stories to fortify their spirits. The keynote underscores that survival is not solely the responsibility of fighters but a shared enterprise where knowledge, creativity, and care are as valuable as combat skill. The opening clashes with the foreigners are sudden and brutal. The keynote paints the first engagement in cinematic detail, the flash of metal against torchlight, the explosion of gunpowder in small skirmishes, and the cries of both native and foreign combatants mingling with the natural sounds of the jungle. Jaguar Paw leads a series of ambushes designed to exploit the enemy's unfamiliarity with the terrain. Vines and branches are rigged to entangle horses, streams are dammed to flood encampments, and concealed pits trap advancing soldiers. Every attack is precise, calculated, and imbued with the tension of survival. The keynote emphasizes the psychological interplay. The foreigners are confident, disciplined, and armed, yet they are disoriented by the environment and the unpredictability of the natives' tactics. Amid the battle sequences, the keynote focuses on character-driven drama. Turtles Run, Jaguar Paw's son, steps forward in unexpected ways, demonstrating resourcefulness and bravery that mirror his father's instincts. Young scouts navigate the forest to relay critical information, learning firsthand the delicate balance between courage and recklessness. Eagle of the East earns the trust and admiration of other tribes through acts of bravery, diplomacy, and leadership, solidifying alliances critical for long-term survival. Ixchel, meanwhile, treats wounded fighters under the canopy, her herbal remedies and intuition saving lives in moments when every second counts. These personal stories enrich the larger narrative, ensuring the audience remains connected to the human stakes amid the chaos of war. The keynote also explores the psychological toll of sustained combat. Fear, grief, and fatigue weigh heavily on characters, influencing their choices and interactions. The foreign soldiers, initially confident, begin to falter as they are forced to confront the cunning and adaptability of Jaguar Paw's people. Internal tensions emerge within the invading forces. Some officers question the morality of their orders, while others push forward with increasing brutality out of fear or desperation. The keynote highlights that conflict reshapes all who participate in it, regardless of allegiance, and that the true cost of survival is measured in both body and spirit. In the climactic sequences, Jaguar Paw orchestrates a multi-layered plan to strike at the heart of the foreign encampment. The keynote describes the careful coordination of traps, signals, and ambush points. Nighttime provides cover, with the sounds of the jungle masking the movement of his warriors. Fires set strategically create confusion, while narrow paths funnel the enemy into disadvantageous positions. The keynote emphasizes tension and cinematic pacing, showing how each decision is critical, each movement a gamble between life and death. The confrontation with Captain Alvarez reaches its dramatic apex in this sequence, with both characters pushed to their physical and moral limits. Alvarez, confident and ruthless, is finally outmaneuvered by Jaguar Paw's understanding of the terrain and his unwavering determination to protect his people. Following the climactic battle, the keynote shifts to the emotional and cultural aftermath. The village begins the painstaking work of rebuilding. Structures are repaired, crops replanted, and rituals performed to honor the fallen. The keynote elaborates on the importance of these ceremonies. They restore spiritual balance, reinforce social bonds, and help survivors process grief. Ixchel leads healing rites, using herbs and prayers, while Jaguar Paw shares stories of courage and sacrifice to teach the next generation resilience and vigilance. Children are involved in these rituals, learning early the traditions that will sustain their culture in an uncertain future. The keynote emphasizes that survival is not only physical but cultural, requiring the continuation of knowledge, language, and belief systems. The keynote continues by exploring philosophical reflections woven into the story. Jaguar Paw contemplates the inevitability of change, recognizing that while the foreigners may continue to arrive, the identity of his people, rooted in community, tradition, and connection to the land, cannot be erased. He understands that adaptation is necessary but that core values must remain intact. This meditation frames the final sequences of the film, reinforcing the narrative's central themes: resilience, cultural preservation, intergenerational responsibility, and the moral complexity of survival in a world shaped by forces beyond one's control. The keynote also portrays moments of quiet triumph amid hardship. Hunters return with game, families share meals, and children play, demonstrating that life continues despite the scars of conflict. These interludes provide contrast to the high-stakes action, reinforcing the humanity at the heart of the story. The keynote emphasizes that these small victories, safe nights, successful hunts, the birth of a child, carry as much significance as victories on the battlefield, embodying the perseverance and hope that sustain communities over generations. The closing sequences focus on Jaguar Paw observing the horizon, where distant sails hint at further challenges yet to come. The keynote frames this moment not as despair but as vigilance and determination. Jaguar Paw's tribe is stronger, wiser, and more united, prepared to face whatever the future may bring. The keynote underscores that this ending is both conclusive and anticipatory. It resolves the immediate threats while acknowledging the ongoing struggle inherent in survival and cultural preservation. The narrative leaves audiences with a sense of awe at the resilience of human communities, the power of leadership rooted in empathy and experience, and the enduring importance of cultural identity. The keynote concludes with reflection on cinematic style, emphasizing visual and auditory elements. The forest is depicted with lush, immersive cinematography, capturing both beauty and danger. Sounds of wildlife, flowing water, and rustling leaves are interwoven with drums, chants, and the clash of metal, creating a sensory experience that conveys tension, emotion, and authenticity. The keynote highlights how pacing, lighting, and composition reinforce narrative themes. Slow, contemplative sequences convey emotional depth, rapid, dynamic shots heighten suspense and action. Every scene is designed to immerse the audience in the world, making them feel the stakes, the environment, and the heartbeat of the characters. In the final reflection, the keynote emphasizes the overarching themes of Apocalypto 2, the collision of civilizations, the resilience of the human spirit, the importance of cultural continuity, and the moral complexity of leadership in times of crisis. Jaguar Paw emerges as a symbol not only of survival but of the enduring connection between people and the land that sustains them. The forest, the tribe, the rituals, and the relationships all converge to tell a story that is both action-packed and deeply reflective, combining visceral thrills with profound human insight. As the forest slowly settles after the climactic battle, the keynote emphasizes the nuanced rhythms of post-conflict life. Every leaf, every rustling branch, and every animal movement reminds the tribe that life continues despite devastation. Jaguar Paw walks through the village at dawn, observing not only the physical repairs, the reconstructed homes, replanted gardens, and cleared pathways, but also the subtle signs of healing in his people. Mothers cradle their children, men and women exchange silent nods of solidarity, and elders quietly guide young hunters in honing their skills for both survival and respect for the land. These seemingly small interactions form the backbone of resilience, reminding the keynote audience that recovery is not merely the absence of danger but the reweaving of relationships, trust, and communal identity. Ixchel, the healer, becomes a central figure in this rebuilding phase. Her subplot is rich with both triumph and struggle. She experiments with combinations of local herbs, consulting sacred texts and listening for whispered guidance from spirits she has always revered. The keynote depicts her labor with meticulous attention, the grinding of roots, the mixing of poultices, and the careful administration of remedies to those weakened by illness. She reflects silently on the fragility of life and the responsibility of knowledge, recognizing that each successful cure strengthens not only bodies but morale. The younger women of the village shadow her movements, learning techniques and oral histories, ensuring that knowledge will survive even if she does not. Her work is symbolic, blending science, intuition, and spiritual devotion, showing the audience that survival depends equally on wisdom and action. Meanwhile, Eagle of the East assumes a mentoring role for the tribe's young warriors. The keynote expands on his growth from skeptic to leader, highlighting his internal reflections and developing philosophy. He teaches the children not only how to hunt and navigate the jungle but also how to think critically, read environmental cues, and work collaboratively in moments of danger. In one extended sequence, he silently observes a young boy struggling to track a deer, realizing that patience and awareness are as important as strength. The keynote uses this moment to explore the intergenerational transmission of survival skills, illustrating that the tribe's resilience depends on both the wisdom of elders and the curiosity and adaptability of youth. The keynote interweaves personal monologues to provide insight into the inner worlds of key characters. Jaguar Paw, alone in the dense jungle at night, reflects on the cost of leadership. He thinks about the lives lost under his watch, the fear in his children's eyes, and the relentless advance of forces beyond his control. These reflections are both painful and enlightening, revealing a man who carries responsibility with humility and resolve. He questions whether his actions have been enough, whether his tribe's survival is sustainable, and how to balance aggression with prudence. These internal monologues are carefully integrated with the external narrative, offering audiences a deeper understanding of the moral and emotional stakes of survival. Cultural rituals are given extended treatment, highlighting their centrality to the tribe's identity and cohesion. The keynote describes a ceremony performed to honor the fallen, blending song, dance, and the use of sacred symbols. Participants paint their bodies with natural pigments, chant in the Maya language, and offer gifts to the spirits of the forest. Children watch and gradually participate, learning the cadence, meaning, and intention behind each movement. These sequences are visually rich and emotionally resonant, emphasizing that culture is not static but alive, continuously reaffirmed through communal practice. The keynote also notes the use of music and rhythm not merely as entertainment but as a means of signaling, coordinating, and fortifying morale, demonstrating how cultural knowledge intersects with practical survival. The narrative further explores minor character arcs that enrich the tapestry of the story. A young hunter named Little Deer, initially timid and unsure, demonstrates courage in a small but pivotal act, rescuing a trapped child during a skirmish. This act earns him the trust of the elders and reinforces the keynote's theme that heroism is not the province of the experienced alone. Other villagers, such as an elder named Stone Face, provide wisdom, historical context, and emotional support, showing that leadership takes many forms. Each minor character contributes to the overarching narrative, illustrating that community strength arises from the sum of individual actions, sacrifices, and insights. The keynote also dedicates sections to the philosophy underpinning the narrative. Jaguar Paw reflects on the balance between action and contemplation, violence and mercy, survival and humanity. The keynote presents his thoughts on the inevitability of change, the cycles of life and death, and the ethical responsibilities of leadership. He meditates on the forest as both protector and adversary, recognizing that every element of his environment offers both opportunity and threat. These reflections provide a philosophical dimension to the story, elevating it beyond a simple tale of conflict into an exploration of human resilience, moral complexity, and the interplay between culture and survival. Extended sequences depict the tribe's preparation for potential future incursions. Jaguar Paw and Eagle of the East lead training exercises, teaching villagers to move silently, set traps, and anticipate enemy strategies. These exercises are rigorous, highlighting both physical and mental discipline. The keynote emphasizes that survival is a holistic endeavor, requiring skill, intuition, endurance, and psychological resilience. The exercises are framed as both practical and symbolic, representing the tribe's ongoing commitment to protect its identity and way of life. The keynote further expands on the sensory environment, creating a fully immersive experience. The sounds of the jungle, chirping insects, rustling leaves, distant waterfalls, are juxtaposed with the harsh clang of foreign weapons, the crackle of fire, and the cries of combatants. The visual landscape is equally rich, from the dappling of sunlight through the canopy to the jagged cliffs and rushing rivers that define the territory. These environmental details are not mere decoration, they shape the action, influence strategy, and heighten tension, reinforcing the narrative's themes of adaptability and harmony with nature. In the final sequences, Jaguar Paw delivers a poignant speech to his people, acknowledging both the victories and the losses they have endured. He emphasizes the need for vigilance, cooperation, and cultural continuity. The keynote highlights how this speech functions not only as narrative closure but as thematic reinforcement, encapsulating the story's central messages: survival is a collective endeavor, identity is preserved through memory and practice, and courage is defined not solely by confrontation but by perseverance in the face of uncertainty. The audience is left with a sense of closure tempered by realism, understanding that while immediate threats may have been mitigated, the struggle to maintain culture, life, and autonomy will continue. The keynote closes by reflecting on the cinematic style, which blends visceral action with reflective sequences. Pacing is carefully modulated, alternating between tense ambushes, intimate character moments, and contemplative rituals. The soundscape and visual composition work in concert to immerse the audience fully in the jungle environment. The keynote emphasizes that every choice, from the choreography of battle to the rhythm of ceremonial music, is designed to reinforce narrative themes and emotional resonance. The final image of Jaguar Paw, standing at the edge of the forest and gazing toward the horizon, encapsulates both triumph and vigilance, a hero who embodies the resilience of his people and the ongoing cycle of challenge, adaptation, and hope. The story of what people refer to as Apocalypto 2 does not begin with any official script, studio announcement, or verified production note. Instead, it begins in the collective imagination surrounding the legacy of the original Apocalypto, a film released in 2006 that left a haunting mark on global cinema. The original movie was born from a fascination with collapsing civilizations, human endurance, family loyalty, and the brutal intersections between spirituality and violence. It was directed and produced by Mel Gibson and became one of the most intriguing cinematic experiments of the early 21st century, a film shot entirely in the Yucatec Maya language, using mostly non-professional indigenous actors, immersed in the lush but merciless jungles of Mesoamerica. The impact of that movie did not fade easily, it stayed in the memory of viewers because it presented a world that felt ancient yet strangely alive, distant yet frighteningly similar to modern anxieties surrounding societal breakdown. As years passed, the movie became larger than itself. It transcended being just a film and became a kind of folkloric artifact, a representation of a lost world, a study of power, a survival tale, and a meditation on the vulnerability of any society that believes itself unstoppable. Fans continued to revisit scenes, the opening hunt, the village's serenity shattered by raiders, the frantic escape through temples dripping with blood, the haunting eclipse, and the relentless chase back through the jungle. People were captivated not only by the visuals but by the rawness, the primal energy, and the unmistakable sense of doom that hovered over every frame. As this fascination grew, the idea of a sequel started forming in corners of the internet, whispered first in discussions, then gradually taking shape in fan theories, speculative articles, and later in ambitious fan-made trailers that claimed to show glimpses of a non-existent continuation. Those concept trailers, created by independent digital artists and AI-assisted editors, stitched together footage from various films to create something that looked like a sequel. Ships appeared on the horizon. Foreign invaders clad in metal armor marched through forests. Tribes united, others splintered, and protagonists wielding spears and bows seemed to prepare for a catastrophic clash between worlds. These images, although fabricated, convinced many viewers that a real studio sequel had been announced. The intensity of the visuals, the jungle atmosphere, and the return of familiar motifs from the first movie made the illusion even stronger. The line between fantasy and reality blurred because the emotional hunger for a sequel was genuine. People wanted to see what became of Jaguar Paw, the protagonist whose journey through terror and loss represented a universal fight for survival. In the minds of fans and speculative writers, the imagined continuation of the story begins years after the events of the original film. Jaguar Paw, once a young hunter struggling simply to protect his wife, unborn child, and surviving family, has grown into a leader or guardian spirit of his people. In this collective imagination, he is no longer a man defined by fear, he is transformed by trauma into a hardened survivor who now carries the responsibility of ensuring the safety of not just his family but his entire community. While the forest around him continues to pulse with life, the tension beneath its surface has changed. The arrival of foreign ships on the coast, the Spanish or other colonial forces, marks an irreversible shift. The world that Jaguar Paw once knew, defined by intertribal disputes and human sacrifice in Maya cities, now faces a threat unlike any before. This imagined world trembles not from internal decay alone but from the collision with a new force of steel, horses, gunpowder, and alien belief systems. In these imagined narratives, Jaguar Paw becomes a symbol of resistance, not a mythical superhero, but a human being trying to protect a fragile culture under existential threat. The new enemies represent more than just military conquest, they represent ideological domination, cultural erasure, and a rewriting of history through force. The jungle, which once was his prison and then his ally, now becomes a battleground pulsing with uncertainty. Fan-written expansions often describe scenes of smoke rising through distant treetops, villagers gathering in silent fear, elders reading omens in the patterns of animals and celestial movements, and Jaguar Paw walking through the forest with the weight of memory heavy on his shoulders. Yet it is important to understand that all of this, every imagined scene, every speculative description, is not part of any actual screenplay or production. No studio, no director, no actor has confirmed an official return to this world. The images people see in supposed Apocalypto 2 trailers are fragments from entirely unrelated films creatively assembled to resemble a sequel. The emotional resonance is real, but the footage is not. And so, the myth of Apocalypto 2 grows not because of Hollywood confirmation but because of longing, the desire to revisit a world that fascinated and disturbed viewers in equal measure. The original cast remains etched in the minds of audiences, especially Rudy Youngblood, who portrayed Jaguar Paw with physical intensity and deep emotional conviction. His performance captured something raw and elemental, the wide-eyed terror of a man hunted, the fierce determination of a father fighting for his family, the silent transformation from prey to predator as he reclaimed his identity. Supporting actors contributed to this atmospheric world, the raiders, the high priests, the enslaved villagers, the villagers left behind. Together, they formed a vivid tapestry of life in a civilization on the edge. In speculative discussions, many imagine which of these actors could return, what new faces might join, and how tribal and colonial societies could collide in a sequel. Some imagine a grizzled, older jaguar paw, others imagine new protagonists rising from younger generations. Speculation about a sequel also invites discussion about the technical and creative elements that made Apocalypto unique. The original's use of indigenous language, practical effects, dense jungle cinematography, and historically inspired, though sometimes controversial, depictions of Maya culture created a cinematic experience that felt immersive despite being stylized. Many believe that if a true sequel were ever produced, it would need to honor these same stylistic commitments: authenticity of environment, physicality of performance, spiritual intensity, and a return to the natural world as both setting and symbolic force. The imagined soundtrack is often described as a mixture of percussive rhythms, deep atmospheric drones, and ritualistic vocalizations echoing across vast forests and river valleys. Another element that fuels the mythology of Apocalypto 2 is the thematic richness of the story world. The original film was about the end of a civilization, not in one catastrophic moment, but through gradual rot, corruption, cruelty, and desperation. Fans imagine that a sequel could explore another kind of ending, the transition from indigenous autonomy to colonial domination. While historically, Maya civilizations did not disappear overnight, their world was altered permanently through external invasion, disease, forced conversion, and systematic cultural suppression. The imagined sequel, therefore, becomes more than an action film. It becomes a meditation on cultural survival, resilience, defiance, and the quiet heroism of communities that continue to resist erasure. Public reaction to the idea of Apocalypto 2 has been a mixture of excitement, confusion, and nostalgia. Many people desperately want the sequel to be real. Others fear that a sequel could never live up to the raw power of the original. Still others express concern about historical accuracy, arguing that if a sequel were ever made, it should strive to portray indigenous cultures with a deeper respect and more nuanced understanding than the first installment. The debates become almost academic. What artistic liberties are acceptable? How should colonization be portrayed? Who should tell the story? And most importantly, how can such a film avoid romanticization or exploitation while still delivering emotional impact? These discussions, although hypothetical, add layers to the myth. They turn an imaginary movie into a symbolic cultural conversation. The desire for a sequel becomes intertwined with ideas about indigenous representation, historical trauma, and cinematic responsibility. Despite this, the majority of viewers who encounter Apocalypto 2 trailers believe them at face value. This reflects the modern media environment, where sophisticated fan edits can easily mimic official productions and where the hunger for certain stories makes people eager to accept anything that confirms their hopes. The non-existence of a real sequel does not diminish the power of the imagined one. In fact, it enhances it. A fictional sequel becomes a space where audiences project their own ideas, fears, hopes, and interpretations. It becomes an open canvas rather than a closed narrative. Some imagine a darker continuation filled with warfare, loss, and tragedy. Others envision a more spiritual film where Jaguar Paw seeks to understand the changing world. Some create alternate realities where the Maya unite against invaders, or where individual acts of bravery become legendary tales passed through generations. Behind all this lies the simple truth: Apocalypto 2 exists not as a film but as a cultural phenomenon created by fans, fueled by emotion, and sustained by digital illusion. The idea invites reflection on how stories persist long after movies end, how fictional worlds refuse to close, and how characters continue to walk through the forests of our imagination even when the credits have long rolled. As the legend of Apocalypto 2 circulates online, it becomes clear that its appeal is as much about what the film represents as what it depicts. The fascination is not purely visual or narrative, it is symbolic, a reflection of contemporary audiences' desire to engage with stories that merge raw human struggle with cultural memory. Fans often describe the imagined sequel as a bridge between the ancient and the modern, a cinematic exploration of the tension between civilization and nature, survival and morality, power and vulnerability. In many ways, the imagined sequel carries forward the existential stakes of the original film, not merely whether one can escape death, but whether one can preserve identity, community, and a sense of meaning in a world that is fundamentally hostile and constantly shifting. In the fan-constructed universe, the sequel is set against a backdrop of dramatic environmental change. The forests that once sheltered Jaguar Paw and his people are imagined as darker, denser, and more treacherous. Rivers surge with the force of seasonal storms, cliffs loom as barriers to survival, and temples, once centers of ritual and hierarchy, now lie in ruin or conceal hidden threats. Every natural element becomes a character in its own right, embodying danger, guidance, and spiritual resonance. Imagine cinematography for this sequel leans into this interplay between human and environment, wide aerial shots of impenetrable jungle canopies, intimate tracking shots of Jaguar Paw navigating dense foliage, and slow, tension-filled moments where the sound of wildlife mirrors the inner turmoil of the characters. Fans imagine the camera capturing every visceral detail, the sweat on a warrior's brow, the tension in a child's grasp on a parent's hand, the piercing stare of a predator hidden just beyond the frame. Thematically, the imagined sequel delves deeper into the psychology of survival and the moral dilemmas of leadership. Jaguar Paw is no longer just a hunted man, he is a reluctant leader whose choices affect the lives of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people. In fan interpretations, he faces impossible decisions, whether to confront the external invaders immediately or retreat to preserve lives, whether to risk his own safety to protect the vulnerable, and whether to preserve cultural rituals in the face of imminent extinction. Each choice is layered with ethical complexity, reflecting a civilization teetering on the edge of collapse yet resisting erasure. The fan-created scripts often emphasize the moral weight of survival, suggesting that heroism in this world is not defined by conquest or spectacle, but by the courage to maintain one's humanity when confronted with overwhelming adversity. The imagined villainy in Apocalypto 2 extends beyond a single antagonist to encompass entire forces of cultural and spiritual conflict. Foreign invaders, armed with unfamiliar weapons and strategies, represent the inexorable tide of history and the threat of cultural annihilation. Within the jungle, rival tribes and splinter groups pose threats from within, creating a multi-layered tension between cooperation and conflict. This imagined complexity mirrors the historical realities of Mesoamerica, where alliances, betrayals, and shifting power dynamics shaped the fates of communities long before the arrival of Europeans. Fans constructing this narrative often emphasize that survival is as much a mental and cultural struggle as it is a physical one, highlighting themes of resilience, ingenuity, and adaptation. The fan interpretations also expand the role of family and generational continuity. In the original film, Jaguar Paw's relationship with his wife and child provided the emotional core. In the imagined sequel, this extends to his broader community. The people he protects are imagined as living archives of knowledge, tradition, and identity. Preserving their lives becomes synonymous with preserving their culture, and each act of protection, defiance, or survival carries symbolic weight. Fans often imagine intimate moments interspersed with epic battles, scenes where elders teach children hidden paths through the jungle, or where villagers whisper prayers and warnings under the shadow of looming temples. These narrative threads give the fan-made sequel both emotional depth and cultural resonance, emphasizing that the story is not only about survival in the physical sense but also about preserving a civilization's memory. The visual style imagined by fans for Apocalypto 2 retains the visceral realism of the original but pushes it further through technological enhancements and artistic imagination. CGI and practical effects blend seamlessly, allowing for dynamic battle sequences while maintaining an earthy, tactile feel. The jungle becomes almost mythic in scale, with mist rising over rivers, vines coiling like serpents, and distant ruins hinting at the civilizations that came before. Fans imagine the lighting to be harsh and unflinching, mirroring the harsh realities of the character's world, sunlight filtering through the canopy in golden shafts, shadows concealing both danger and opportunity, and firelight reflecting ritualistic ceremonies and the tension of impending conflict. Sound design is imagined to be equally immersive, combining the natural ambience of the jungle with distant drums, animal calls, and the haunting echoes of ritual chants. The imagined narrative arc also considers the role of spirituality and ritual in shaping both character and plot. In these fan-created worlds, Jaguar Paw's people continue to interpret signs from the natural and spiritual worlds, reading omens in animal behavior, celestial events, and the whispers of wind through the trees. Rituals and ceremonies serve not only as cultural markers but as sources of strength, reflection, and foresight. At the same time, the conflict with invaders challenges these traditions, creating a tension between preservation and adaptation. Fans often imagine that these spiritual dimensions add layers of psychological depth, as characters grapple with fear, doubt, and faith amidst overwhelming odds. Public discourse around Apocalypto 2 also illustrates the contemporary appetite for mythmaking in digital spaces. The fan-created trailers, speculative plots, and discussion forums reveal how audiences co-create narratives in response to media that has left a lasting impression. The story's expansion into an imagined sequel is an exercise in communal storytelling, where individual contributions, from storyboard concepts to dialogue speculation, combine to produce a collective vision. In this sense, Apocalypto 2 exists simultaneously as a media artifact and as a participatory cultural phenomenon, demonstrating the evolving nature of storytelling in the digital age. Critics of the fan-created sequel concept argue that without studio backing, rigorous research, or professional filmmaking, the imagined Apocalypto 2 risks distorting historical realities and cultural representation. Advocates counter that it provides a creative outlet for re-engaging with narratives that deeply resonate, offering space to explore alternative histories, ethical dilemmas, and emotional arcs that might otherwise remain unexplored. Both perspectives reflect a broader conversation about the ethics of storytelling, the responsibilities of cultural representation, and the ways in which audiences engage with media beyond its original form. Ultimately, Apocalypto 2, as imagined by fans, functions as a mirror of contemporary concerns projected onto an ancient setting. It explores the fragility of civilization, the resilience of the human spirit, the ethical complexities of leadership, and the profound significance of cultural memory. Even in its hypothetical form, the sequel challenges viewers to confront questions about survival, morality, heritage, and identity. It is a testament to the enduring power of narrative that a film which does not yet exist can inspire such rich, layered, and emotionally resonant speculation. The legend of Apocalypto 2 is therefore less about production dates, trailers, or cast lists, and more about the persistent influence of storytelling on imagination, cultural discourse, and the shared human fascination with worlds both distant and familiar. In the imagined continuation of Apocalypto 2, the emotional landscape of the story is as critical as the physical one. Jaguar Paw, now older and burdened by years of survival, embodies the weight of memory and responsibility. His face, weathered by the sun and etched with scars from countless battles, becomes a canvas upon which the story of endurance and tragedy is told. Fans often describe sequences in which he pauses in the forest, listening to the distant sounds of drums or the rustle of leaves, reflecting on the lives lost and the lessons learned. These moments are quieter, almost meditative, yet they carry immense narrative power, showing that the essence of heroism in this world is not merely in confrontation but in reflection, foresight, and the courage to endure internal as well as external conflicts. The imagined sequel's plot intricately weaves together multiple threads, creating a tapestry that reflects both personal and societal stakes. Alongside Jaguar Paw's struggle to protect his community, other characters emerge to shape the story. Young warriors from the village learn to navigate both jungle and political intrigue, representing a new generation whose actions and decisions may determine the survival of their culture. Women, often overlooked in the original narrative, are given amplified roles in this speculative world, leaders, strategists, healers, and teachers who navigate the interwoven pressures of tradition and survival. Through their eyes, the story explores the tension between continuity and adaptation, revealing that survival is not just a physical endeavor but also a cultural and intellectual one. In this imagined sequel, the foreign invaders bring not only superior weaponry but also ideologies that challenge the very foundation of Jaguar Paw's people. The fan narratives often describe scenes in which these outsiders attempt to assert control, offering technological and material superiority while disregarding the spiritual and ecological knowledge of the indigenous communities. Conflicts are not limited to open battle, they extend into strategic maneuvers, attempts at negotiation, and subtle psychological warfare. These tensions offer opportunities for suspense, moral reflection, and dynamic storytelling, as characters navigate the complex interplay between survival, honor, and the preservation of cultural identity. The environmental context continues to play a central role. Storms, rivers, and treacherous terrain serve as both obstacles and allies, shaping the flow of action and providing metaphorical weight. Fans imagine sequences in which Jaguar tracks through flooded landscapes, where the rising waters threaten to engulf entire settlements, forcing characters to make split-second decisions. The jungle itself is imagined as a living entity, responding to human presence with a mix of protection and danger, guiding, challenging, or punishing according to the narrative need. Light and shadow are manipulated with cinematic precision, shafts of sunlight illuminate paths of hope, while darkness conceals danger and uncertainty. These artistic choices, even if purely speculative, mirror the immersive style that made the original film so visually and emotionally compelling. Music and sound design are equally central in this imagined world. Fans speculate that the sequel's score would blend percussive tribal rhythms, ethereal vocalizations, and ambient jungle noises to create a soundscape that is simultaneously primal and cinematic. In battle sequences, drums echo the heartbeat of the forest, while ceremonial chants resonate through the trees, underscoring moments of tension and reflection. Sound becomes a narrative tool, signaling approaching danger, guiding the characters, and shaping the audience's emotional response. The imagined score amplifies both the brutality and the beauty of the world, reminding viewers that in this universe, life and death, celebration and mourning, are inseparable. Character development remains a driving force in this speculative narrative. Jaguar Paw's journey is complemented by secondary characters whose arcs explore themes of loyalty, betrayal, courage, and adaptation. Tribal elders provide guidance steeped in wisdom and experience, yet their advice is tempered by the understanding that old methods may no longer suffice. Younger characters confront the challenge of reconciling tradition with necessity, learning to innovate while honoring their heritage. This interplay of generational perspectives adds narrative richness, emphasizing that the survival of a community depends on both respect for the past and the willingness to embrace change. Conflict in this imagined sequel is multi-layered, encompassing interpersonal, intertribal, and intercultural dimensions. Fans often describe dramatic battle sequences where strategies are improvised, alliances are tested, and every choice carries mortal consequences. Villagers may attempt ambushes in dense forest corridors, using intimate knowledge of the terrain to counter technologically superior enemies. Conversely, moments of diplomacy, negotiation, and subterfuge highlight that confrontation is not always physical. Every encounter tests the character's moral compass, ingenuity, and commitment to protecting their people. In this way, the narrative becomes an exploration of leadership under duress, survival ethics, and the complex dynamics of power. Imagined ceremonial and spiritual elements provide additional layers of meaning. In fan-created narratives, rituals are central to the community's cultural life, serving as expressions of devotion, markers of passage, and tools for navigating uncertainty. Ceremonies are often set against dramatic natural backdrops, the rising sun over a river, a blood-red eclipse, or the rhythmic crashing of waves against a distant shore. Through these events, characters seek guidance from ancestors, gods, and the forces of nature, reinforcing the intertwined relationship between survival and spirituality. These sequences also offer visual and emotional counterpoints to the intensity of combat and political intrigue, creating a narrative rhythm that balances tension with reflection. The imagined sequel expands the thematic exploration of legacy, memory, and resistance. Jaguar Paw's struggle is no longer just personal, it is emblematic of a civilization grappling with external pressures that threaten to erase history and identity. Fans imagine the community documenting knowledge, preserving stories, and passing on wisdom to younger generations, framing survival as an act of cultural continuity. The juxtaposition of physical struggle with the preservation of intangible heritage underscores the high stakes of the narrative. Survival is not merely about life but about safeguarding identity, memory, and the accumulated wisdom of a people. Furthermore, fans speculate about the emotional resonance of such a sequel. Moments of loss are profound, capturing the fragility of life in a world rife with danger. Moments of triumph are tempered by awareness of ongoing threats, reinforcing that survival is never absolute. Relationships are tested by extreme circumstances, with love, loyalty, and familial bonds serving as both motivation and vulnerability. The tension between hope and despair drives character development and emotional engagement, inviting viewers to reflect on the universal themes of endurance, sacrifice, and the human spirit. Cinematically, the fan-generated vision of Apocalypto 2 emphasizes immersive world-building. Every environment is meticulously imagined, from the thick, shadowed jungle to the ruined temples of fallen civilizations, to the makeshift settlements of survivors. The camera is envisioned as a participant in the story, following characters through claustrophobic forest paths, tracking their movements with fluidity and tension. Visual motifs recur, reinforcing themes, animals representing strength, wisdom, or danger, the interplay of light and shadow signaling moral ambiguity, water symbolizing both life and peril. Fans imagine these visual choices creating a sense of continuity with the original film, while expanding the cinematic language to encompass broader stakes and higher narrative complexity. In the imagined universe of Apocalypto 2, every moment carries a sense of urgency, not merely because of the threat of invaders, but because survival itself has become a moral crucible. Jaguar Paw, whose journey from hunted tribesman to reluctant leader forms the emotional spine of the story, is confronted with the realization that the physical survival of his people is intertwined with their cultural and spiritual survival. In fan speculation, one of the most compelling sequences involves him leading a nighttime exodus of his community through treacherous terrain, guided only by the faint glimmer of stars and the memory of paths known to ancestors. This journey is not simply about evading enemies, it is a symbolic passage through memory, history, and identity, emphasizing that a people's connection to their land and rituals is as vital as their ability to wield weapons. Alongside Jaguar Paw, imagined secondary characters form a complex network of loyalties, rivalries, and relationships. The younger warriors, brimming with courage but lacking experience, must learn quickly how to survive in a world where mistakes can be fatal. In one fan-created scene, a young warrior hesitates to strike in combat, torn between adherence to tradition and the necessity of improvisation. This moment is emblematic of the overarching tension in the story, the conflict between what is known and what must be done. Simultaneously, female characters, often portrayed as guardians of wisdom and strategy, emerge as central figures. They are healers, negotiators, and defenders of sacred knowledge, providing both practical and emotional guidance. In fan speculation, a central female character instructs the children of the village in hidden paths and survival techniques, blending storytelling, mentorship, and cultural transmission into a powerful narrative thread. The foreign invaders, imagined as both physically and ideologically superior, serve as catalysts for escalating conflict. Unlike traditional antagonists, they are not presented merely as one-dimensional villains but as a reflection of historical forces, colonial ambition, technological advantage, and cultural arrogance. Fan narratives frequently describe sequences in which these outsiders attempt to impose their order upon the jungle, using fire, iron, and intimidation to undermine indigenous authority. However, the imagined story emphasizes the ingenuity of Jaguar Paw and his allies, portraying their ability to manipulate terrain, utilize stealth, and leverage intimate knowledge of the forest to offset technological inferiority. The tension between these forces provides both narrative drive and philosophical reflection, highlighting the resilience and creativity required to preserve autonomy under extreme pressure. The jungle itself becomes a character, shaping the narrative as much as any human presence. Fan imaginations often describe moments where the environment simultaneously conceals and reveals, protects and punishes. Dense foliage provides cover for ambushes yet hides predators. Sudden river rapids threaten survival while offering pathways for escape. Storms erupt without warning, forcing characters to confront both their physical limitations and emotional endurance. Imagined cinematography emphasizes this symbiotic relationship between human and environment. Sweeping aerial shots convey scale and peril, while intimate, close-up tracking shots immerse viewers in the tension of each step through tangled vegetation. In these depictions, the forest is not merely a setting, it is a dynamic, living force that reflects the stakes of survival and the balance between human ambition and natural law. Sound, in the imagined sequel, is elevated to a narrative instrument. Fans speculate that drums, wind, animal calls, and ritual chants would be interwoven with diegetic sounds to convey tension, emotion, and foreshadowing. In battle sequences, the rhythmic pounding of drums mirrors the character's adrenaline, while distant vocalizations serve as reminders of spiritual presence and guidance. Quiet moments, punctuated by the hum of insects or the rustling of leaves, provide contrast and allow for reflection, emphasizing the psychological toll of survival. Music and sound become extensions of narrative, shaping audience perception, deepening immersion, and connecting the human and natural worlds in profound ways. Rituals and spiritual dimensions in Apocalypto 2, as imagined by fans, are not mere aesthetic flourishes, they provide insight into character, culture, and worldview. In one envisioned sequence, a full moon illuminates a ceremonial gathering atop a ruined temple, where elders recite prayers to ancestors while children observe in silence, learning the importance of memory and continuity. These rituals underscore the community's resilience, offering both solace and instruction amid chaos. They also serve as visual and thematic counterpoints to the brutality of battle sequences, reminding viewers that the world of Jaguar Paw is one where the sacred and the profane coexist, and where understanding the past is essential to surviving the present. Conflict in the imagined sequel is multidimensional, encompassing physical combat, psychological struggle, and moral tension. Fan narratives often describe elaborate battle sequences that blend strategic cunning with raw instinct. For instance, a sequence might depict a carefully planned ambush along a riverbank, where traps, decoys, and intimate knowledge of the terrain allow a smaller group to hold off a numerically superior enemy. At the same time, personal confrontations highlight the human cost of conflict. Moments of hesitation, fear, and grief underscore that each life is precious and each decision carries weight. These depictions reinforce that heroism is defined not by brute strength alone, but by intelligence, courage, empathy, and the willingness to shoulder responsibility. The narrative also explores themes of legacy and generational continuity. In fan-created visions, characters engage in acts of teaching, storytelling, and preservation that transcend immediate survival. Children are trained in survival skills, ethical decision-making, and cultural rituals, ensuring that knowledge and values endure beyond the lifespan of any one individual. Elders serve as repositories of wisdom, guiding decisions and providing perspective shaped by experience. These intergenerational dynamics add depth and emotional resonance, emphasizing that the fight for survival encompasses both tangible and intangible elements. Life, culture, memory, and identity are all at stake. Imagined sequences also explore the tension between hope and despair. Fans often describe moments of quiet reflection, in which characters contemplate the losses they have endured, the uncertainty of the future, and the impermanence of life. These sequences are counterbalanced by moments of triumph, ingenuity, and solidarity, highlighting the resilience of the human spirit. The emotional arc mirrors the physical arc, survival is not linear, and victories are often temporary or bittersweet. This interplay of despair and hope deepens audience engagement, inviting reflection on the broader human experience and the moral dimensions of endurance and leadership. Cinematically, the imagined sequel continues the immersive, visceral style of the original film while expanding its scope. Fans envision sweeping vistas of jungle and ruined cities, intricate choreography of hand-to-hand combat, and intimate shots capturing the physical and emotional strain of characters. Lighting and color palettes are imagined to reflect both environmental and narrative conditions, sunlight filtering through dense canopies, storms casting deep shadows, and fires illuminating moments of ritual or conflict. Visual motifs, such as animals symbolizing courage or danger, rivers representing life and peril, and temples as monuments of past civilizations, are woven throughout, creating layers of meaning and continuity with the original film. In the imagined narrative of Apocalypto 2, dialogue becomes a conduit for character depth, emotional resonance, and cultural transmission. Fans often speculate about moments in which Jaguar Paw instructs the younger generation, not with grandiose speeches, but with simple, weighty words that carry generations of wisdom. In one envisioned scene, as a group of adolescent warriors struggles to navigate the jungle at night, he whispers, "The forest is not our enemy. It is a mirror. Learn its voice, or it will teach you pain." These words are emblematic of the story's philosophical undercurrents. Survival is inseparable from understanding one's environment, and true leadership lies in empathy, patience, and foresight. Dialogue like this, sparse yet potent, reinforces the emotional gravity of the imagined sequel and conveys lessons that extend beyond physical survival to moral and cultural stewardship. Fan narratives also explore intimate moments between characters, highlighting relationships strained and strengthened by extreme circumstances. The imagined interaction between Jaguar Paw and his wife, for instance, is charged with tension and tenderness. In a speculative scene, she admonishes him quietly as they prepare to move the community through a river crossing, "You carry them all, but do not carry yourself to ruin." Moments like these blend practical instruction with emotional resonance, demonstrating the intertwined nature of personal and communal survival. They underscore the central thematic question of Apocalypto 2, what does it mean to endure, and at what cost? The human cost is never abstract, it is reflected in every glance, hesitation, and whispered counsel, making the characters' decisions weighty and profoundly human. Battle sequences in the imagined sequel are described with staggering complexity and intensity. Fans often envision confrontations where numerical inferiority is counterbalanced by ingenuity and intimate knowledge of the terrain. In one sequence, Jaguar Paw and a handful of warriors set ambushes along narrow riverbanks. Suspended traps fashioned from vines and sharpened stakes force the enemy into vulnerable positions. A fan-written description depicts arrows flying through dense fog, the snap of hidden snares, and the visceral sound of combat amplified by the echoing river. Yet these moments are not gratuitous, each maneuver reflects strategic thinking, the ingenuity of indigenous knowledge, and the moral weight of conflict. Every skirmish tests not only physical prowess but ethical judgment, who should be spared, who should be confronted, and how to balance the imperative of defense with the sanctity of life. The imagined spiritual dimensions of Apocalypto 2 remain integral. Ceremonies and rituals are depicted as guiding forces, shaping decisions and bolstering the resolve of characters. In one fan-created vision, Jaguar Paw climbs the steps of a ruined temple to conduct a midnight vigil. The elders chant in low, resonant tones while children observe from the shadows. Firelight flickers across painted faces, casting dancing shadows that evoke the spirits of ancestors. The ritual is not simply ceremonial, it is a narrative mechanism, a way for characters to interpret signs, reinforce unity, and access inner strength. Spiritual elements are woven into the physical and psychological landscapes, emphasizing that survival in this world requires not just skill and courage, but connection to history, belief, and moral purpose. The imagined sequel also explores profound philosophical themes. Questions of fate, mortality, and cultural continuity permeate the narrative. Characters often contemplate the impermanence of life, the fragility of civilizations, and the ethical dilemmas posed by survival. In one fan-created dialogue, an elder tells Jaguar Paw, "We are but shadows of those who came before. To survive is not only to live, but to carry their memory through our deeds." This sentiment echoes throughout the imagined narrative. The struggle is not merely against enemies, but against erasure itself, against the slow fading of culture, memory, and identity. Every action, from the smallest act of kindness to the most daring battle strategy, becomes a statement about what is worth preserving in a transient world. Environmental storytelling is central in fan visions of the sequel. The jungle, once merely a backdrop, becomes a living participant. Fans imagine scenes in which towering trees, thick undergrowth, and meandering rivers create natural obstacles, hiding both danger and salvation. Seasonal changes shape narrative arcs, torrential rains transform rivers into barriers, while the dry season exposes hidden dangers. The flora and fauna are not passive, jaguars, snakes, and other predators are both literal and symbolic threats, representing the inherent unpredictability of nature. This symbiosis of environment and story mirrors the original film's attention to tactile realism, while amplifying it into a grander, almost mythic scale. In addition to battles and environmental challenges, the imagined narrative emphasizes the communal aspects of survival. Scenes depict villagers collaborating to construct defensive structures, preserve food, and transmit knowledge. Fan narratives often include sequences where children mimic the movements of elders, practicing navigation, hunting, and ritual behaviors. These moments, though less overtly dramatic than battle scenes, are pivotal. They illustrate the ongoing process of cultural transmission and highlight the interdependence of community members. Survival is thus framed as a collective endeavor, encompassing both physical and intellectual labor, and reinforcing the thematic core of resilience through unity. Fan-created storylines also consider the psychological toll of prolonged conflict. Characters endure grief, fear, and moral uncertainty. Imagined sequences describe Jaguar Paw grappling with loss, silently mourning friends and relatives while forcing himself to maintain strength for the sake of others. These internal struggles add layers of depth to the narrative, illustrating that heroism is as much an internal struggle as an external one. Moments of introspection are juxtaposed with bursts of action, creating a rhythm that mirrors real human experience, tension, reflection, endurance, and reaction. These imagined sequences lend the narrative an emotional authenticity that resonates even in the absence of a real film. The imagined sequel also leverages symbolic imagery to reinforce themes. Rivers signify both life and danger, marking boundaries between safety and peril. Ruined temples and crumbling city walls embody the fragility of civilization and the passage of time. Animals act as guides, omens, or mirrors of human behavior. In fan depictions, a jaguar may appear before a critical moment of conflict, representing courage, instinct, and the connection between humans and nature. These symbols create a layered visual and narrative language, allowing the story to communicate complex ideas without exposition, and reinforcing the immersive experience that fans crave in a sequel. The legacy of Apocalypto begins with an origin that is far larger than the film itself, rooted in the ancient world of Mesoamerica and the fascination modern audiences have with civilizations whose rise and collapse still echo across history. When the original movie was released in 2006, it was immediately recognized as a bold cinematic experiment, a brutal, visually arresting, linguistically authentic survival thriller set against the backdrop of the Maya civilization in its period of decline. Mel Gibson, who directed the film after the massive success of The Passion of the Christ, insisted on filming it entirely in the Yucatec Maya language, using mostly non-professional actors, capturing dense jungles, towering temples, and elaborate rituals with a mixture of historical research and artistic interpretation. Because of this extreme stylistic and narrative commitment, the film became something far more than just an action movie. It became a window into a vanished world. Over the years, despite its violence and controversial portrayals, Apocalypto developed a cult following, with many viewers expressing curiosity about what might have happened after the arrival of Spanish ships in the final scene. This curiosity eventually evolved into widespread speculation about a potential sequel. The world depicted in Apocalypto is not simply a geographical space but a living ecosystem of beliefs, fears, myths, and political structures, and the film's narrative immerses the audience in the consequences of a civilization burdened by its own internal decay. The mines of suffering, the temples dripping with blood, the cries of captives led to sacrifice, these elements serve not as mere spectacle but as symbolic commentary on corruption, social collapse, and the cyclical nature of human folly. Jaguar Paw, the protagonist, is not simply a hero of physical endurance, he is a symbolic vessel representing the ordinary individual swept into the currents of historical transition. His desperate journey to return to his family while being pursued by elite warriors shows how personal fate often intersects with great cultural upheaval. As he runs through dense foliage, across muddy fields, through torrential rain, and over cliff precipices, the landscape becomes a character in itself, an arena of survival and transformation. By the time he emerges from his ordeal, battered but alive, the film arrives at its famous final visual, Spanish ships resting quietly offshore, their sails white as bone, suggesting an entirely different kind of storm soon to come. This final moment has fueled nearly 2 decades of questions about whether a second film might explore the violent meeting between indigenous cultures and European colonizers. It is this intersection between historical speculation and cinematic storytelling that ignited the modern buzz around Apocalypto 2. Online discussions, fan theories, concept posters, and AI-generated trailers all stem from the desire to imagine what might follow Jaguar Paw's escape. In many of these imagined continuations, the Spanish arrival becomes the catalyst for a new narrative, perhaps involving the first waves of conquest, the spread of disease, the fracturing of tribal alliances, and the inevitable confrontation between Jaguar Paw's small family and a world war they never asked to be part of. Some theories suggest that a sequel would depict resistance movements among indigenous tribes, while others imagine a more personal story that mirrors the original, a survival thriller in which Jaguar Paw must once again protect his family but against an enemy unlike any he has seen. These kinds of fan-driven narratives reflect how powerful the ending of the original film is, open-ended, symbolic, and historically loaded. Despite the fertile ground for storytelling, no official sequel has ever been announced. Yet this lack of confirmation has not stopped audiences from inventing their own versions of what the second film might be. The rise of AI-generated media over the past few years allowed creative fans to produce remarkably polished trailers that simulate what a sequel might look like, often using deepfake techniques, repurposed footage, and digitally altered landscapes. These trailers spread widely, leading many casual viewers to assume that an Apocalypto sequel was underway. But each time the rumor resurfaces, journalists, film historians, and insiders clarify that the production is not real, reinforcing that the Apocalypto 2 videos circulating online are purely conceptual or fan-made. This dynamic between desire and reality has created a strange cultural phenomenon, a film sequel that exists vividly in the imagination of the public even though it has no official existence whatsoever. Because so many viewers love the original film, discussions about a potential sequel often expand into deeper reflections on Mesoamerican history and what stories remain untold in mainstream cinema. The Maya, like the Aztecs and other indigenous civilizations, faced catastrophic decline following European contact, not only due to warfare but also due to diseases, forced conversion, slavery, and the dismantling of traditional systems. A sequel could explore these themes realistically, tracing the slow erosion of Jaguar Paw's world as foreign forces reshape the land and its people. Alternatively, a sequel could choose a more mythic path, focusing on spiritual interpretations of colonization and blending mystical elements with historical events. Fans debate whether a sequel should maintain the strict linguistic authenticity of the original, whether it should feature the same visceral survival-driven pacing, and whether it should follow Jaguar Paw's family or introduce a new protagonist entirely. Each of these possibilities reflects how deeply the original film tapped into universal themes of hope, fear, endurance, and cultural survival. One reason the idea of a sequel persists so strongly is that the characters of the original movie feel unfinished, not unfinished in their story arc, but unfinished in their relationship to the broader world. Jaguar Paw has proven his resilience and commitment to his family, yet viewers are aware that the challenge he overcame was only the prelude to an even greater tide sweeping toward his homeland. His wife, who gave birth while trapped in a flooded well, represents the determined strength of women in indigenous societies. Their children symbolize continuity, resilience, and the possibility of rebuilding even after devastation. If a sequel did exist, it would have a built-in emotional foundation, a family whose survival is intertwined with the survival of their entire culture. Yet, because such a film remains an idea rather than a production, these characters exist in a kind of narrative suspension. They live vividly in the collective imagination, but their future remains unwritten. Speculation often extends to the potential cast of a hypothetical sequel. Fans wonder whether Rudy Youngblood, the actor who portrayed Jaguar Paw, would return, given that his performance was integral to the emotional resonance of the film. Many argue that it would be nearly impossible to recast him without sacrificing authenticity. Others debate whether Mel Gibson would be the ideal director for a sequel, considering both his unmatched stylistic commitment and the controversies that have surrounded his public image. Some suggest that a new filmmaker, perhaps one of indigenous heritage, could bring a fresh and culturally sensitive perspective to the story. All these conversations highlight the intersection between art, culture, and representation in the modern era, where the authenticity of perspective often matters as much as the authenticity of historical details. The absence of a confirmed production also brings attention to the nature of modern film rumors. The internet age, with its rapid spread of user-generated content, often blurs the line between genuine marketing campaigns and cleverly crafted fan creations. Anyone searching for Apocalypto 2 trailer is likely to encounter dozens of videos that present themselves convincingly, complete with dramatic narration, digitally aged characters, sweeping jungle vistas, and music reminiscent of the original soundtrack. For a viewer who doesn't follow movie industry news closely, these videos can easily appear legitimate. The result is a cyclical wave of renewed excitement followed by inevitable disappointment when viewers learn that the supposed sequel is not real. This cycle says as much about viewer enthusiasm as it does about the power of digital creativity. In the absence of an official sequel, the original film continues to grow in cultural impact. Its themes resonate today as much as they did in 2006. The fragility of civilizations, the consequences of political corruption, the destructive nature of fear-driven leadership, and the resilience of ordinary people who fight for their families amid chaos. Jaguar Paw's story, framed within a collapsing society, becomes a metaphor for every era in which ordinary people must navigate extraordinary historical shifts. The arrival of the Spanish ships in the final scene is no longer simply a historical transition, it becomes a symbol for all forms of external disruption that reshape societies. This broader relevance allows Apocalypto to endure in modern discussions and academic analyses, even without a follow-up. Although there is no confirmed release date, official poster, film studio involvement, or verified cast list, the dream of Apocalypto 2 survives in the collective imagination of fans and in the speculative space maintained by online creators. Until a major studio or the original filmmakers provide a definitive announcement, the sequel remains a phantom, talked about, imagined, reinterpreted, digitally simulated, but never manifested. Yet its absence does not diminish the interest it continually generates. Instead, it inspires fans to explore Mesoamerican history, understand the social complexities of ancient civilizations, and reflect on the timeless struggle for cultural survival. The fascination with a potential sequel also stems from the unique way Apocalypto blends realism with mythic storytelling. While the events depicted in the film are grounded in historical research, from weaponry to architecture to social hierarchy, the narrative itself carries a timeless allegorical quality. Jaguar Paw's journey through the jungle is as much about human endurance and moral fortitude as it is about evading physical danger. This dual narrative, historical realism intertwined with mythic resonance, offers a rich foundation for any imagined continuation. Fans speculate that a sequel could lean further into this allegorical layer, depicting not only the physical survival of individuals but the cultural and spiritual survival of an entire people. For example, the rituals, prayers, and oral traditions of the Maya, which survived European conquest, could serve as narrative anchors to explore resilience and cultural memory, showing how traditions are passed down even under extreme duress. Another reason a sequel is conceptually compelling is the idea of moral complexity. Apocalypto does not present its characters in black and white, even those who participate in ritualistic violence are portrayed as part of a larger social structure, following norms, laws, or survival imperatives within their society. This nuanced portrayal invites questions about justice, retribution, and the ethics of survival. In a hypothetical Apocalypto 2, these moral dilemmas could intensify. How would Jaguar Paw respond to foreign invaders who wield unfamiliar technologies and ideologies? How would he navigate alliances with other tribes who may have been previously enemies? Such questions offer fertile ground for dramatic tension and thematic depth, giving a sequel the potential to be intellectually engaging in addition to visually spectacular. Fan-made narratives often explore these possibilities, envisioning a world where Jaguar Paw becomes a reluctant leader, guiding his people through the unprecedented challenges of contact with Europeans. Some storyboards and online speculative scripts suggest that the sequel could introduce historical figures as antagonists or allies, bridging fact and fiction. For instance, Spanish conquistadors might be presented not only as agents of destruction but as complex characters themselves, whose motivations, greed, religious zeal, fear, add layers to the narrative. These imagined storylines could explore themes of cultural misunderstanding, negotiation, and resistance, emphasizing the psychological and strategic dimensions of survival rather than simply relying on physical action. Such an approach would honor the spirit of the original film, which combined high-stakes survival with an awareness of social and cultural context. In addition to narrative potential, the aesthetic and technical aspects of a sequel excite fans. The original Apocalypto is notable for its kinetic camera work, immersive set design, and intense soundscape. In imagining a sequel, creators speculate about the evolution of these elements: expansive jungle vistas transitioning to coastal settlements, urban centers under siege, and a chaotic clash of indigenous and European technologies. Digital effects, if used judiciously, could enhance rather than replace the tactile realism that characterized the first film. Furthermore, advancements in sound design and musical scoring could deepen the immersive experience, integrating traditional Maya instruments with more contemporary orchestral techniques to underscore the emotional intensity of the story. Fans have even created AI-generated concept art depicting imagined cityscapes, battle sequences, and ritualistic ceremonies, offering glimpses into what a fully realized sequel might look like if it were ever produced. The discussion of a sequel also touches on cultural representation and the ethics of storytelling. While the original film was lauded for its linguistic authenticity and use of non-professional actors, it also faced criticism for certain depictions of violence and social structures. In imagining Apocalypto 2, careful attention would need to be paid to consulting historians, anthropologists, and indigenous voices to avoid perpetuating stereotypes or inaccuracies. Some fan discussions and concept proposals suggest that a new director, perhaps one with indigenous heritage or deep cultural knowledge, could bring a fresh perspective, balancing the need for dramatic tension with respectful, informed representation. Such an approach could elevate the project beyond a simple action sequel into a nuanced exploration of resilience, adaptation, and the complexity of cultural encounters. Beyond narrative and technical considerations, the continued speculation about a sequel highlights the evolving nature of modern fandom. In today's digital culture, fans do more than consume, they create. They generate trailers, scripts, illustrations, and even interactive experiences that imagine the continuation of beloved stories. In the case of Apocalypto 2, this fan engagement has created a feedback loop. The more realistic the imagined content appears, the more it circulates, and the more the fan community builds lore around a film that does not yet exist. This phenomenon raises fascinating questions about authorship, intellectual property, and the power of collective imagination. The line between official content and fan creation has blurred, demonstrating how digital media can transform spectators into co-creators, even shaping the perceived future of cinematic franchises. Another dimension of the imagined sequel involves its potential thematic focus on generational continuity. In the original film, Jaguar Paw's family serves as the emotional core. Fans speculate that a sequel might not only follow Jaguar Paw himself but also the next generation, highlighting the ways in which cultural knowledge, survival skills, and resilience are transmitted across time. This could offer a multigenerational narrative structure, juxtaposing the immediate dangers of colonial incursion with the long-term struggle for cultural survival. Through this lens, the sequel could explore the tension between adaptation and preservation, showing how traditions are maintained even in radically transformed circumstances. Such a storyline would resonate deeply with contemporary audiences, emphasizing the enduring relevance of history to modern life. In imagining a sequel, some creators also consider the potential for cross-cultural storytelling. While the original film focuses almost entirely on the Maya perspective, a sequel could interweave multiple viewpoints, illustrating the encounter between different civilizations from both sides. This approach could humanize the Europeans without diminishing the suffering of the indigenous peoples, providing a richer, more complex narrative landscape. By incorporating multiple perspectives, the story could address themes of empathy, misunderstanding, and the consequences of choices made under extreme pressure. Such an approach would not only expand the narrative possibilities but also enhance the intellectual engagement of the audience, turning the film into both a visceral experience and a thought-provoking exploration of historical dynamics. Finally, the imagined world of Apocalypto 2 extends beyond plot, characters, and visuals. It encompasses the ethical and philosophical questions that underpin survival, civilization, and cultural continuity. How do societies respond when external pressures threaten to dismantle everything they have built? How do individuals navigate moral compromise, loyalty, and the instinct to protect loved ones amid existential threats? These are the questions that a hypothetical sequel could explore in depth, providing both action and reflection. While no official production exists, the persistent speculation, fan creativity, and historical curiosity surrounding Apocalypto 2 demonstrate that the story of Jaguar Paw and the Maya continues to resonate. The original film's ending, with its quiet yet ominous foreshadowing of colonial contact, leaves ample room for interpretation, inviting audiences to imagine how courage, resilience, and human ingenuity might respond to history's inexorable tides. In imagining a continuation of the story through Apocalypto 2, one must consider the profound psychological and socio-cultural layers that could shape the narrative. The original film places Jaguar Paw in extreme circumstances, forcing him to navigate not only the physical perils of a collapsing society but also the emotional turmoil of familial responsibility. A sequel could explore how trauma shapes character development over time, particularly as he and his family face entirely new forms of existential threat. For example, while the first film centers on immediate survival against a known and visible enemy, the raiders and the oppressive structures of his society, a sequel could introduce the invisible, pervasive dangers of colonization, such as disease, cultural erasure, and enforced religious conversion. These new threats would challenge Jaguar Paw and other characters not only physically but morally and spiritually, compelling them to adapt strategies that test loyalty, ingenuity, and resilience in ways unprecedented in their world. The narrative potential of such a sequel is enriched by the intersection of historical fact and imaginative reconstruction. While it is impossible to know precisely how individual Maya families experienced European contact, historical records, archaeological evidence, and oral histories provide a framework that can inspire realistic yet creative storytelling. The original film already demonstrated a commitment to historical authenticity, from weaponry to clothing to ritualistic practices. A sequel would have the opportunity to expand this scope further, delving into coastal and urban settings that reflect the transformative impact of European incursion. Cities that were once thriving hubs of commerce and governance could be depicted under siege, juxtaposed with untouched villages deep in the jungle, where indigenous knowledge, survival techniques, and spiritual traditions continue to flourish. Such contrasts could provide compelling visual and thematic tension, emphasizing the fragility and adaptability of civilizations under extreme stress. Fan speculation often imagines narrative devices that enhance dramatic tension while remaining true to the spirit of the original. For instance, some concept narratives propose that Jaguar Paw might act as a bridge between different tribes, consolidating alliances to resist a common threat. Others envision a more symbolic approach, portraying the encroaching Europeans as embodiments of an unstoppable historical force, representing not merely individuals but the larger consequences of imperial expansion. These narrative choices underscore the dual role of storytelling in both entertainment and education. They provide thrilling, immersive experiences while prompting reflection on historical and cultural dynamics. A sequel could further explore the tension between agency and inevitability, showing how individuals navigate moral and practical choices when the structures of their world are rapidly dissolving. Another fascinating area for expansion is the spiritual and ritualistic dimension of the story. In the original Apocalypto, Maya beliefs and ceremonies were integral to the plot, from the interpretation of eclipses to the use of symbolic gestures in rituals. A sequel could delve more deeply into the interplay between spiritual belief and practical survival. For example, Jaguar Paw's encounters with supernatural or symbolic phenomena could mirror the broader social transformations taking place, offering commentary on resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of cultural narratives. By juxtaposing the tangible threats of conquest with the intangible forces of spiritual tradition, a sequel could achieve a heightened narrative richness, combining historical realism, mythic resonance, and psychological depth. From a technical perspective, the continuation of this saga offers tremendous possibilities. The original film employed innovative cinematography, with dynamic camera work that often followed characters closely through treacherous landscapes, creating an immersive sense of motion and danger. A sequel could evolve these techniques, incorporating aerial and underwater shots to portray expansive environmental challenges, such as river crossings, coastal navigation, or encounters with unfamiliar terrain introduced by European settlement. Advanced sound design could capture the layered auditory experiences of the time, from the clatter of distant metal armor to the subtle calls of jungle wildlife, creating a visceral sensory tapestry. Music, too, could serve as a narrative agent, blending traditional Maya instruments with orchestral motifs to emphasize emotional and thematic arcs, allowing viewers to feel the tension, triumph, and sorrow of the characters' journeys. Cultural representation remains a crucial concern in imagining a sequel. The original film faced criticism for certain depictions of Maya society, though it was widely praised for its commitment to language, costume, and environmental authenticity. A sequel would need to navigate these sensitivities carefully, ensuring that the portrayal of both indigenous and European actors maintains historical accuracy while respecting cultural perspectives. This might involve consulting anthropologists, historians, and cultural practitioners to guide everything from costume design to dialogue to ritual representation. Doing so would not only increase authenticity but also allow the film to explore complex themes of cross-cultural encounter, colonial impact, and survival without perpetuating harmful stereotypes. The fan community's engagement with Apocalypto 2 also reflects the evolving nature of participatory media. Online forums, concept videos, digital art, and speculative scripts demonstrate how fans act as co-creators, extending the life of the original narrative in imaginative ways. These activities reveal the power of collective imagination, where storytelling becomes a shared, iterative process. Fans speculate about plot twists, character arcs, environmental challenges, and symbolic motifs, effectively constructing a parallel narrative universe that exists independently of official production. In this sense, Apocalypto 2 exemplifies how modern fandom can transcend the limitations of traditional cinema, generating a rich cultural conversation that bridges historical curiosity, narrative analysis, and creative expression. Generational continuity also emerges as a compelling theme in these fan-created narratives. In the first film, Jaguar Paw's family represents the enduring core of human attachment and cultural transmission. Imagined sequels often extend this motif, depicting how children, grandchildren, or other community members inherit both the wisdom and the burdens of their forebears. The intergenerational transmission of knowledge, whether practical survival techniques, spiritual beliefs, or social strategies, could provide a narrative through-line emphasizing how resilience is cultivated over time. This theme resonates universally, connecting historical storytelling with contemporary concerns about legacy, cultural preservation, and adaptation in the face of global change. Symbolism and metaphor would likely continue to play a major role in a sequel. Just as the arrival of Spanish ships in the original film signified both literal and figurative upheaval, a continuation could introduce additional symbols representing power, loss, or transformation. Natural phenomena such as storms, eclipses, and floods could be interpreted through both scientific and mythological lenses, emphasizing the interplay between human agency and environmental forces. The recurring motif of the jungle as both protector and obstacle could evolve, reflecting the changing stakes of the narrative as characters move from isolated villages to more contested landscapes. Such symbolic richness would ensure that a sequel maintains the intellectual and emotional resonance that made the original film so memorable. Finally, the hypothetical Apocalypto 2 would serve as a meditation on the tension between survival and morality, agency and inevitability. By expanding the narrative beyond immediate physical threats to include social, cultural, and existential challenges, the sequel could elevate the story from a simple adventure tale to a complex exploration of human resilience and the ethical dimensions of historical transformation. The speculative nature of the sequel underscores a unique characteristic of modern storytelling, audiences no longer passively consume narratives but actively engage with and expand them, creating a living dialogue between past, present, and imagined futures. In this context, the enduring interest in Apocalypto 2, even in the absence of official production, demonstrates the power of narrative imagination to bridge historical inquiry, ethical reflection, and immersive cinematic experience. In addition to narrative and thematic potential, Apocalypto 2, even as a purely speculative concept, offers a remarkable opportunity to explore the evolution of cinematic style in relation to historical storytelling. The original film's kinetic camera movements, handheld sequences, and immersive point-of-view shots created an intimate connection between the viewer and the protagonist, often giving the sensation of being physically present in the dense, perilous jungle. A sequel could build upon these innovations, employing advances in cinematography such as drone photography, stabilized tracking shots over vast landscapes, and immersive 360-degree sequences to enhance the sense of scale and danger. Such techniques would not merely dazzle visually but could also reinforce the story's thematic tension, highlighting the vastness of the world outside Jaguar Paw's immediate control and contrasting it with his intimate, personal struggle for survival. Sound design, too, would play a critical role in creating the immersive atmosphere of a sequel. In the original film, every element of the environment, rustling foliage, distant animal calls, the rhythmic chant of ritual participants, was meticulously layered to create a sensory-rich experience. For a continuation, the soundscape could expand to include maritime and urban elements, reflecting the influence of European colonization and the encroachment of new technologies on indigenous landscapes. The interplay between natural and human-made sounds could serve as a subtle narrative device, contrasting the organic harmony of traditional life with the disruptive presence of foreign powers. Musical scoring, blending traditional instruments with orchestral and electronic elements, could underscore emotional arcs, from moments of intimate familial connection to climactic confrontations, deepening the viewer's empathetic engagement with the character's plight. A sequel could also benefit from advances in visual effects, not as a replacement for practical realism but as a complementary tool. The original film relied heavily on tangible sets and physical stunts to convey the visceral intensity of pursuit and escape. In the sequel, effects could augment these sequences, creating naturalistic storm systems, dynamic river currents, or architectural reconstructions of coastal settlements under siege. The careful integration of CGI with practical sets would allow filmmakers to maintain the tactile authenticity that defined the first film while expanding the scope and complexity of the environments, showing not only the immediate dangers faced by the characters but also the broader transformations of the world around them. Fan engagement with the idea of Apocalypto 2 has become a fascinating case study in modern participatory media. Online communities have generated concept trailers, storyboards, character sketches, and alternate plotlines, creating a rich tapestry of creative speculation. These fan contributions often explore narrative threads left open by the original film, imagining new challenges, moral dilemmas, and character developments. Some conceptual stories depict Jaguar Paw forming alliances with previously antagonistic tribes, while others envision his family adapting to new societal structures under colonial influence. Such speculative storytelling demonstrates the power of collective imagination, showing how audiences can expand upon a narrative universe even in the absence of official production. This participatory phenomenon raises intriguing questions about authorship, ownership, and the evolving role of audiences in shaping contemporary storytelling landscapes. Cultural and historical accuracy remain central to any meaningful discussion of a sequel. The original film's commitment to linguistic and environmental authenticity set a high standard, and any continuation would likely need to maintain or exceed these levels. Consulting with historians, anthropologists, and indigenous cultural experts would be essential, ensuring that depictions of ritual, governance, and daily life are respectful and informed. Moreover, the inclusion of indigenous perspectives in the creative process could enrich the narrative, providing insight into the complexities of cultural survival, adaptation, and resistance. By combining rigorous research with imaginative storytelling, a sequel could offer a multidimensional exploration of historical events, emphasizing the agency, intelligence, and resilience of Maya communities in the face of profound external disruption. Another compelling aspect of a speculative sequel lies in its potential exploration of generational continuity and intergenerational trauma. Jaguar Paw's family serves as the emotional anchor of the original film, and a continuation could delve deeply into how experiences of violence, displacement, and cultural upheaval shape successive generations. Children and grandchildren could inherit not only the practical skills of survival but also the psychological and moral frameworks developed in response to historical trauma. Such narratives could explore the tension between memory and adaptation, showing how families and communities negotiate the preservation of tradition while responding to rapidly changing circumstances. By foregrounding these themes, a sequel could elevate the stakes from immediate survival to the enduring struggle for identity, culture, and moral integrity. Symbolism and allegory would likely continue to play a significant role in a sequel. The original film's final image, the Spanish ships on the horizon, operates as a metaphor for historical inevitability, external threat, and cultural transformation. A continuation could expand this symbolic landscape, incorporating recurring motifs such as water, fire, and celestial events to represent cycles of destruction and renewal, resilience and vulnerability, or the interplay between human agency and uncontrollable forces. By carefully integrating visual and thematic symbolism, the narrative could maintain the intellectual and emotional depth that characterized the first film, providing a rich subtext that resonates with contemporary viewers while honoring the historical and cultural context. Ethical storytelling would also be a central concern. Depicting European colonization requires sensitivity and nuance, avoiding simplification while acknowledging the profound suffering inflicted on indigenous communities. A well-crafted sequel could explore the complexity of these interactions, illustrating both the immediate threats posed by invasion and the broader cultural consequences over time. By emphasizing historical and emotional authenticity, the narrative could provide a compelling and meaningful reflection on human resilience, ethical decision-making, and the consequences of power and violence. Such an approach would not only satisfy audience expectations for dramatic tension but also encourage reflection and empathy, transforming the film from mere spectacle into a culturally and morally engaged work. In addition to narrative, technical, and ethical considerations, a sequel could explore the thematic tension between civilization and wilderness. In the first film, the jungle functions as both protector and adversary, shaping the protagonist's journey and emphasizing the intimate relationship between humans and their environment. In a continuation, this dynamic could evolve to include the encroachment of urban settlements, deforestation, and maritime exploration, creating new forms of environmental tension.